what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I have for you guys a video that has been requested for probably, I don't know, since Shadowlands launched. Today we're going to be talking about Shadowlands trinkets for Warlocks, as well as BIS Soulbinds and Conduits, which, like I said, has been requested for a long time now. So we're pretty much hitting the final part of our storyline quest for whatever covenant you've chosen, which means that we're actually unlocking the, well, the final like Soulbind slots, not just second potencies. Nia, Dreamweaver, Corain, I think, for Night Fae basically should all be unlocking not next week, but the week after in their final slot, talking like the final abilities they have. So I want to talk about that a bit today. We've run so many sims, so I want to show you guys how those abilities sim, what potency conduits are looking good now that we have 2 unlocked for basically everybody in single targets in AoE, basically talking about BIS conduits and soulbinds and abilities for basically every setting and every spec, every build, all of that. I also want to take a bit of time and talk about trinkets in this video, because that has been a hot topic for weeks and weeks and weeks. We are in an odd state with trinkets in Shadowlands in 9.0. Hopefully that changes in 9.1, but we're going to have a bit of a debate there. Now I have indeed updated the Warlock 9.0 Shadowlands spreadsheet as well to have all of this on there. There's a new section for trinkets, a new section for sims. Now I will say these sims are Night Fae sims. I love you guys. If you're a Venthyr or a Nephilord or a Kyrian Warlock, that's great. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. I really am. But it took me literal hours to run these sims for just Night Fae. So I would encourage you to go to raid bots and run a top gear sim if you're one of those covenants to see which abilities are simming best for you. For example, I believe I think Ameni's final ability actually sims pretty well, the one that's paired with the endurance conduit. So I'd sim that on your own. But if you're looking at just raw conduits for Demo, these conduits will indeed be the same across every covenant that there is. So with that being said, let's get into the video. I'll have a link to the spreadsheet in the video description, and any week orders you see here you can get for free off my Twitch. If you want to swing by, hang out, feel free to do so. So let's start off discussing one of 8,000 sims and go from there. Okay, so for those of you who aren't really familiar with the Warlock spreadsheet that I've made, I made this actually leading through Shadowlands Alpha into Beta and pretty much just updated it for launch. Now, the bosses tab, legendaries, legendary crafting tabs, for the most part, these have been here for a little while. There is Demo pre-raid BIS gearing down here as well, and the Conduits tab. But the big thing that we talked about a few minutes ago, I did indeed add a BIS Night Fae Soulbinds conduit for every spec, as well as a Trinkets section. Now, we're going to have a decent bit of a debate on Trinkets, which I was not able to add to this section because I'd be writing a book. So let's start off with the actual Soulbind section here. Now, okay, I guess you can say spoilers ahead. Here are your Conduit 1 and Conduit 2, in a sense, best simming, I guess you can call it builds for Afflictions with Life and Life, Affliction with AC, Destro Roaring Blaze, Destro Reign of Chaos. This is the demonology, like Demonic Strength, Grimoire Felguard, Vile Fiend build. This is the FTS Dreadlash build. Now, all these sims are run with 1 target, 3 target, 1-3, 1-3 to really show the value of the conduits single target and the value of them in 3 target settings. Now, they all are patchwork 5-minute sims, and the link to the actual sim is right here. So starting off with Affliction single target, you can scroll down here if you want as well. This basically shows you every single combination that I have, that I ran, that I simmed. AF single target, AF 3 target, these correspond to this and this. So starting off with AF single target, my main question here was, so we obviously have the option of playing double potency now. Single target, you know, you're probably going to want Focus Malignancy. You're probably going to want Cold Embrace. But my question was, in about 2 weeks or a week and a half, we also have Dreamweaver and we have Corain, whatever, opening up here with their final abilities. And we also have Nia's Tools Burrs. Now, Burrs is an ability that's been talked about for a while through beta, through early launch, but we really didn't get a whole lot of time to play with it on beta. So you have your double potency here, one being right here, second one actually being right here. But Burrs is not attached to a potency slot, it's actually attached to an endurance slot. So essentially you're simming, if you want to sim Burrs, you're going to go Burrs and potency versus potency and like poison and potency here. So 2 potency or 1 potency and Burrs. Now I will say it's hard to sim with Nia's Tools poison here, because technically this also is a damage increase. You have to interrupt basically a caster to apply this dot, and this does get you a potency conduit here and here. But the thing is, as a warlock, your interrupt is going to be 24 to 30-ish seconds. At this point, I don't even know if axe toss would count as one because demonology and axe toss. But regardless, I wanted to sim this. So we started off with affliction, simming all conduits here, and we ended up actually getting to the point here, looking at single target, like we said, one target, focus malignancy, Nia's tools, burrs is actually going to be, as long as these sims are indeed accurate, going to be your best conduit in a sense. It's not really a conduit, but your best choice here over your second potency. Now burrs is very, very strong. Number one, because affliction has damage modifier, damage increase modifiers, one being haunt and the other being shadow's embrace. Now that very well might end up actually adding a bit to cold embrace's value, but you still want focus malignancy and burrs here, which is surprising. But being real here, when it comes to rating, I don't really want to have to maintain shadow's embrace. I'll do it anyways, but there are fights where you can't really do it as well as others, like Huntsman Altimore, Dance Boss, Stone Legion Generals. So having burrs around as a better option in the first place is awesome. I'm super happy to see burrs simming this high. Now, while it's really cool to see burrs simming as your second best conduit or option, I guess you can say, for single target, the really interesting thing is that Nia's tools burrs also simming best for a second slot in 3 target for affliction. Pulling up this sim, I'll show you here, we did indeed sim corrupting Leer here. We simmed all 4 of these. Now, I also want to say it's very important to keep in mind these are 5-minute sims with 1, 2, 3. We even ran some 4 target sims. So depending on, let's say for example, if we ran like a 4 target sim, that might end up giving us another dark layer because it's 4 targets being active with Leer compared to 3 for 5 minutes comparatively to 3 targets. So fight duration is very, very important to keep in mind here. But looking at a 3 boss 5-minute sim, Nia's tools burrs is still simming really high. Rolling Agony does gain a bit of value, but this is also an AC sim versus a Siphon Life sim, so it doesn't gain as much as you necessarily think it would. This sim does indeed still put Cold Embrace sort of high, which I'm sort of iffy about. I mean, you will gain some value obviously from maintaining it in plus. Oh, I forgot to mention, all these conduits are 226 item level. There's not some weird like 200, 213 variants. They're all max rank 7, 226 for this end of patch gearing. Look at this, Nia's tools burrs is still indeed your highest conduit of choice here, or ability, as you can say, of choice here, with focus malignancy, which honestly is great. You do see rolling agony here, you see corrupting Leer here, but if we shortened or increase this fight duration a bit, I guarantee corrupting Leer would gain a bit more value here. So there's a bit of give and take. It's important to keep that in mind, but the most consistent conduit for even 3 target sims, Nia's tools burrs. It's very impressive. 1.75 procs per minute. So, I mean, it doesn't, I don't believe there's any kind of ICD on this, but as long as sims are actually working properly for Nia's tools burrs, which we've heard a bit more about recently with having like a week and a half till it actually becomes a thing, I'm impressed. Burrs looks pretty solid for affliction. Moving on to demonology here, destruction here. Once again, 1 target, 3 target. The best Soulbind we have here for these is Nia. I forgot to mention here, looking at the overall sims, I believe I have one here somewhere. Let me try and dig this up on my page of 8,000 different tabs here. I ran an affliction sim basically running all 4 Soulbinds. And the best Soulbind across the board was indeed, here we actually have it here, was indeed Nia. So I will show you if that changes, if like Dreamweaver is better for Demon, which hint it is in certain settings, what these sims say. I'll definitely point that out, but you can also see it in the spreadsheet. This is really briefly the affliction sim that we ran here. You can see Nia here being malignancy, burrs, malignancy, cold embrace. This is single target. You also see Dreamweaver here, about give her 80 or so DPS behind. You see Corain here with wild hunt tactics. So Nia is still indeed the best Soulbind for the final max renown level of affliction. Moving on to Destro, like we said, 1 target, 3 target. 1 target, you have Ashen Remains being your conduit of choice, and I'm perfectly okay with this. Combusting Engine is a nightmare conduit to play with, and being real, Ashen Remains is pretty much going to be just a flat damage increase to Chaos Bolt and Incinerate. Now, Destro was not really a great single target spec at this point, but Ashen Remains is more or less a, hey, here's a damage bonus, set it and forget it. You're pretty much, well, going to have Immolate rolling on your target at all times. Now, once again, interestingly enough, look at these sims here. You have Combusting Engine, Ashen Remains, Engine, Inferno Brand into Duplicitous Havoc, but the big thing here, look at the consistency. Look at burrs. It's showing this because I was simming with a different conduit. It's fine, don't worry about it. Burrs across the board. There's not even a mix of like Ashen Remains and Engine before burrs. It's just burrs across the board. It's that strong. You go down a little bit here, you see Dreamweaver having actual Ashen Remains, Combusting Engine, and this is the first time we've seen Field of Blossoms pop up as a final ability. This is indeed Dreamweaver's final, I guess, activation, whatever you call it. Whenever you pop Soul Rot, you get a haste bonus for I think 10 seconds. Yeah, 10 seconds, which is 12% haste. It's actually a lot, only on a minute cooldown, but it doesn't touch burrs. Burrs is roughly 150 DPS ahead. So Ashen Remains, Nea's Tools, burrs, followed by Combusting Engine being about 65-ish DPS worse, which is totally fine with me in my book. When you go 3 target though, now very similar to how Affliction was with Corrupting Leer versus Rolling Agony and whatever else, Infernal Brand and Duplicitous Havoc are recommended here. I will pull up the sim as well. So the sim actually has Duplicitous Havoc being better than Infernal Brand, but I'm also playing Wilfred's for this sim, for what it's worth. This sim here, we're actually playing Synergy. We're playing Wilfred's here. We changed the Reign of Chaos for this build, which you can see also reflected here as well. Roaring Blaze versus Reign of Chaos. So for this, you can see Duplicitous Havoc is here. Once again, paired with burrs. Now, relatively close, I guess about a 50 DPS difference, you actually have Duplicitous Havoc with Ashen Remains. Now, Ashen Remains is going to be a permanent damage increase on both targets, and you're Havocing on both. So there's a bit of actual like stack damage increase here, which is nice. Scrolling down a bit, you do indeed see Infernal Brand here. But once again, if this sim was, let's say, it's about 110 DPS difference here. If this sim was, let's say, 4 minutes or 3 minutes, or if this sim got you a second Infernal and then basically that pack died, Infernal Brand gains a tremendous amount of value here. And look at the highest Infernal Brand sim here. It's Infernal Brand with what? Burrs. ES Tools, burrs. So personally, 8,740 DPS versus 8,628. There's a bit of a difference here, but 112 DPS is not as much as it seems in a large AoE based scenario playing Reign of Chaos, playing Infernal Brand. So personally, I think if you have your Infernal, and if you're playing Wilfred's especially, I think personally Infernal Brand with burrs is going to be your best choice here. Infernal Brand will indeed gain more value in 4 target scenarios, 5 target scenarios as well. And once again, these are indeed all 5-minute sims. So I would personally say Infernal Brand, which is why I have it here first over Duplicitous Havoc, then paired with Nea's Tools, burrs. I'm curious here actually, is there I guess you can't compare those two together. Yeah, you can see here the next closest thing below that is actually Duplicitous Havoc with Infernal Brand here, and it's essentially a wash almost. They're both very, very close. You have a 0 DPS difference here between the two. So I wouldn't necessarily fault you for playing Havoc with Infernal Brand if you didn't want to play burrs. But once again, when you get to that 4 or 5 target scenario and you're more or less just using your Havoc for shard gen, burrs and Infernal Brand are just going to pull ahead even more. I think this is probably the best build for Destro right here. It's just hard to see in sims because once again, timing is huge, and plus it's key, and it depends how large you're pulling, how many packs you're pulling, everything like that. So moving on to Demonology here, we see Nea as our main Soulbind of choice. And once again, for those of you guys who might have missed it, you can scroll down and see all the combinations I'm just showing you here. AF, Destro, single target, Destro 3 target. We just looked at these here. Demonology single target. This is playing the normal Demonic Strength, Grimoire Felguard, Vile Fiend build with consumption. It's more burrs. Born of Blood here with Nea's Tools, burrs. Once again, playing Vile Fiend, Grimoire, Demonic Consumption. But something sort of interesting happens here. So we have Born of Blood and we have Nea's Tools, burrs. But what is second? It's Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver with Tyrant Soul with Born of Blood. We're also playing Wilfred's here, by the way. We're not playing Synergy. We're playing Wilfred's, so we have a shorter Tyrant, which means that technically Field of Blossoms is probably going to gain a bit more value. This is Dreamweaver with Field of Blossoms. If you have about a minute Tyrant, give or take, you can pair every single Soul Rot with your Tyrant. Now keep in mind, Soul Rot's not going to get you Growth and Degradation. That is tied to Nea, which is also, burrs. But it's going to get you Field of Blossoms, which is a 12% haste increase for the most part, pretty much your Tyrant's entire duration. Plus, you're able to play Tyrant Soul, you're playing Born of Blood here, and getting that last little bit of value out of Field of Blossoms. Now, Tyrant Soul, I will say, has a bit more value here than not when playing Wilfred's, because shorter Tyrants, more Tyrant Soul value. But once again, Burrs, very close here. A 15 DPS difference, but Burrs with Born of Blood. And you can see Tyrant Soul, Burrs here, Fel Commando, Burrs here as well. But keep that in mind. Dreamweaver being your second best conduit, I guess, of choice. The cool thing here is that Nia has so many. Nia's good. Nia is just straight up good for Destro, for Demo, and AF. But having Dreamweaver be this close, a 15 DPS discrepancy, is actually really nice, because technically it gives you an option to play Demo with this terrible conduit system we have on a, I guess, lesser Soulbind in a sense than you would for AF and Destro. Going back to the spreadsheet though here, this is where it gets really interesting. Demonology, 3 targets. Dreamweaver. We're not playing Nia anymore as far as the sims are concerned. And once again, things change a bit depending on duration. And this is 3 targets once again. But look at this. This is going to be Nia. So I was simming with Nia off the bat. But Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver playing Born of Blood. I actually can't show you here because she's a little off the screen. But Dreamweaver, Fel Commando, Born of Blood, Field of Blossoms in 3 target has actually overtaken Nia with Burrs. Field of Blossoms and the haste increase that it gets you, it's just strong. It's just strong for Demo in multi-target scenarios. I mean, it affects your Felguard. Once again, playing Fel Commando here for more demonic strength damage and AoE, it just gets you a lot of value. If you look down here, actually Fel Commando has pulled ahead of Born of Blood by a tiny bit here as well in 3 targets, which looking back to the 1 target sim here, it's a bit lower. Born of Blood being higher than Fel Commando being about a 45 DPS loss, but not here, because Fel Commando, demonic strength, heavy spinning, AoE cleave, you get more value out of your Tyrant, your Fellstorm, your demonic strength, even like his basic melee damage. Just gets you more value. This build here, I have to say, playing Born of Blood with Fel Commando has felt great for Demo with this build. Born of Blood really smooths the spec out, and Fel Commando is a very strong option when playing demonic strength with this build. And once again, Field of Blossoms. Now, I have not actually played with Field of Blossoms myself, but seeing this sim being real, I'm excited for it. I'm down for it. So that is the single target build of Demonology. Now, if you wanted to change talents around a bit here for plus, say maybe play like Vile Fiend and Soul Conduit, or Soul Strike and Grimoire, I'd encourage you to come back and run your own sims. But regardless, moving on to my favorite build of Demonology, let's talk a little bit about the FTS Dreadlash Big Dogs build. So, Demonology from the Shadows Dreadlash Big Dog build. We're not even touching Nia here. All we're doing is going Dreamweaver 1, Dreamweaver 3. Born of Blood being your main conduit of choice for single target, with Tyrant Soul factored in for Conduit 2, and then Born of Blood into Carnivorous Stalkers for basically 2 target plus, because Carnivorous Stalkers is insane with this build. It's basically the conduit that props up this build. Looking at the single target sim here, once again, Dreamweaver, Born of Blood, Tyrant Soul, Field of Blossoms. We're playing Wilfred's here once again, so Tyrant Soul does indeed have a tiny bit more value, and to some extent, so does Field of Blossoms. Scrolling down, here's Nia's Tools Burrs. It's actually fallen a tiny bit, about 15 DPS to actual Dreamweaver here. Now, the big thing with this build, Field of Blossoms 1, the haste increase. The haste increase with your Tyrant being out, extending your dogs and having them, giving them a longer duration, giving them more haste, more chances to reproc FTS through Dreadlash and apply it in like an AoE setting, even though it's a single target. Giving them a chance to apply FTS more often means that Field of Blossoms is gaining a bit more value here, which is at least what I assume is happening at this point. But once again, Nia's Tools Burrs is indeed relatively close here, playing Born of Blood. Carnivorous Stalker is sort of down here. It's not bad, but keep in mind, this is single target. And the FTS Dreadlash build is built much more for AoE. You want to be AoEing your Dreadlash or your FTS through Dreadlash. You want to be getting those Carnivorous Stalkers reprocs in AoE. In single target, sure, you can dump your Demon Bolts and things, but it's not anywhere near as impactful as getting a second AoE proc in a 5, 10 plus target pull. Moving on to 3 target though. Born of Blood, Stalkers. Let's take a look at this here. There's a bit of a difference. Carnivorous Stalkers with Born of Blood, Field of Blossoms, has pulled ahead a little bit. It's pulled ahead by about 158 DPS over Born of Blood Burrs. So both builds here, technically, you're actually seeing Carnivorous and Born of Blood here off of Nia being sort of close, but Field of Blossoms, once again, ahead even more here. This is the highest Nia build here, because this is like just playing Burrs, but you can see how strong Carnivorous Stalkers is here with just in general for this build in AoE. Born of Blood obviously being your mainstay, Carnivorous is huge with FTS Dreadlash, but the biggest thing here, once again, Field of Blossoms being a tiny better with Dreamweaver compared to actual Nia. It's surprising because Grove Invigoration is very strong, but so is the actual haste bonus the field brings you with every single tyrant. This is a 1-minute ability. This is tied to your Soul Rod. As long as you stand in the Field of Blossoms, you get the haste increase and you can crank. And having that paired with more, with just more dog chomps, with dogs being extended, having more haste, chomping again, tyrant hitting faster, all of that, it just compounds upon itself. This is probably what I feel like the most synergistic build of Demonology out there, even though it's only really good in AoE. It's really cool to see Dreamweaver actually being an option for these builds. Now, I will say, I was pretty surprised by Nia's Tools Burst being this good for AF and 3 target, this good for Destroy and 3 target. Although once again, Infernal Brand and Duplicitous Havoc are basically a wash here versus like Burrs. You can run Brand and Havoc versus just, you know, Brand and Burrs or Duplicitous and Burrs. Either way, Nia's Tools Burrs looks pretty well positioned to be a really strong option heading into, I guess, final Renown, which we get once again in, I believe, 2 weeks. It looks to be really strong. This is a passive set it and forget it kind of ability that you have, and it's simming stronger than Cold Embrace. This is not a 210 or 213 Cold Embrace conduit. This is a max 226 Cold Embrace conduit. This is AoE. This is single target. Nia's Burst is ahead by like, what, 35 DPS? It's actually pretty crazy. And with having multiple dots and things rolling, you can have multiple burst procs at certain points. So I do feel like Cold Embrace is a bit overvalued in Sims right now. I don't know the current state of AF, you know, 3 target, 4 target APLs, but that's just even more value for Nia's Tools Burst. It looks really impressive. I'm impressed, but I'll be real with you, I'm happy about it. I'm happy. So we'll see where it goes. But TLDR, if you want to look at any of the Sims, once again, I'll have a link to the spreadsheet down below in the video description. Bookmark and come back whenever you want. Here are the links to all these Sims. They will time out and disappear, I believe, after 30 or 60 days. So check the actual date in this video. But TLDR, they're all here. The images all match the actual Sims. I just pulled them right out of it. Nia's Tools Burst looks like a pretty big contender. I'm impressed. Let's get into the trinket part of the video. So I get so many questions on stream and on YouTube and everything about trinkets. Trinkets in 9.0, trinkets in Shadowlands. Which ones are good? Which ones are bad? Now, I'm always down to help with trinkets and gearing and whatever you have, but I'll say I can't tell you what your 184 Glyph of Assimilation does versus your 192 Badge of Justice versus your 172.6 Glyph of Assimilation versus your 94.2 Glyph of Imperial Ordnance. I don't even know what I'm saying. I can't run Sims trinkets in my head. I can't do it. Like, nobody in the world can do it, but raid bots can do it. So I do want to talk a bit about how each trinket is simming, but I would always encourage you guys to go run your own Sims on raid bots and then apply the logic that I'm going to tell you in basically this trinket summary. So starting off on Warcraft logs here, briefly just scrolling through, we do indeed have a spreadsheet to go over. There's a lot of trinkets here. You see Glyph, Cube, Imperial Ordnance. You see a bit of a badge, a little badge here, a few Unbound Changelings, another Ordnance here, some Rubies. Now, there are a few fights. There's a pretty big dominance of one trinket, looking at like Imperial Ordnance on Sludge Fist. That's for a good reason. I'll explain that when we actually get into the actual trinket section here. But for the most part, there's a pretty decent mix here. And that's because trinkets are a disaster in Shadowlands 9.0, which hopefully changes in 9.1. But so flashbang ahead, boys, getting back into the spreadsheet here. So I've listed every single trinket that I think is relevant at this point, starting with Inscrutable Quantum Device and going all the way to Soul Igniter here. Now, I've also listed Mythic Plus grades, rating grades. I didn't put a note here that I feel most likely the optimal mix of trinkets for rating is either or PvP trinket, Bell, Changeling, Ruby, Insignia, things like that. I normally opt for stat-based ones and plus, barring it being a really good damage-based effect, which I don't really think there are many of right now. So I want to go over each trinket and explain why I think they're good, why I think they're bad, why they're simming properly, why they're not, and then I just want to give you guys the most information so you can make an informed decision as to what you want to play and what you don't. Number one here, the biggest question everybody has: my cube sims so well but nobody plays it. I opened an Inscrutable Quantum Device at 226 week 1 for my vault, and I thought it was great. It was week 1. I went in to play with it in the raid during progression and I hated it. People who play with the trinket hate it. because unless you're a healer, I guess, because it is in a progression setting, unless it's a boss is pretty trivial and not very challenging, it is very, very hard to actually get the stat-based effect here. So this will give you a mix of different effects. It'll give you like a stat-based increase. If your HP or close allies is below 30, it heals them. If a healer has less than 20% mana, it'll give the healer mana. It removes crowd control effects. It drops something to taunt. Now, it really won't taunt in the raid. If the boss is below a certain percent health, it'll deal execute damage instead. Now, you can indeed sort of get around the execute clause here. But TLDR, it is so incredibly hard to get value out of this trinket in a raid setting because it's a 3-minute cooldown and you can pop it on pull and get your haste, mastery, crit verse, whatever you have stat wise. But 3 minutes later, it's much harder to actually guarantee that on use secondary stat effect. It's a lot of secondary stats and it comes with baseline intellect or strength or agi, whatever you are. But having a trinket as a 3-minute cooldown, popping it and giving a healer mana, hey, I love my healers, but it feels terrible, you know? And like, there are no raid fights this tier where you need to play the trinket to give healers mana. If your healer is running out of, you don't need to do that. Like, you're there to DPS. Your healers are there to heal. Your tanks are there to tank. If there's a fight like that where people need to use this trinket for it, then go for it. But there's not this tier. I don't really think there ever has been. TLDR, not being able to get the secondary stat effect on this trinket is really punishing, and having it be a 3-minute cooldown makes it even worse. If this was like a minute and a half, even 2 minutes, okay, I give a healer mana, okay, but the next time I use it, I got the stats again. Okay, that means you're using this trinket at 0, 3, and 6 over the course of a fight. Half these fights this raid tier don't even last 6 minutes long, so you're probably getting the one on use on pull, and then it's just garbage the rest of the pull. So that is why Inscrutable Quantum Device is a large trap in progression rating. When it comes to farm bosses and things, I don't think this trinket is that bad because, well, I mean, your healers for the most part won't be spending as much mana. You won't have to deal with that being an issue. In Mythic Plus, this trinket is better, I think it is in rating, because your healer shouldn't be crazy low, below 20% mana on most pulls, and you can pretty much see if you're going to heal somebody or not. So I like the trinket more in Plus in a sense, but also a 3-minute cooldown in Plus is sort of awkward. You know, you compare it with your Dark Lair or other large cooldowns. Maybe play like double on use this in like a badge, but you can't like stagger them, but you can't really pair this very well. So I think it's good in Plus. No, it's very misleading in rating. But if you have one, I have a max eye level one. Go for it, rock it. If it's working for you, great. I'm happy for you. I'm just saying that you might be giving your healers mana a bit more than you think you are. Number 2, Unbound Changeling. I think this is one of, if not the best equipped base trinket in the game right now for Warlocks. Its baseline intellect and your abilities have a chance to give you haste, mastery, or crit. It changes based off the food you actually eat in game. Now, there's a rare chance, a small chance of you actually getting a proc that gives you haste, crit, and mastery whenever you eat food and change it for the day. But you can change whatever stats you want from this trinket. You can eat food over and over and over and change it every single pull if you want it. But the big thing here, which you can see on the list here, this is an equipped trinket. There are so many on-use trinkets. Use. There's so many on-use trinkets right now in game. And using one on-use trinket, if you're playing 2, incurs a 20-second cooldown, or I guess, yeah, it puts your other on-use trinket on cooldown for 20 seconds. So you can't play like the cube and like the glyph and pop it at the same time. It won't happen. It doesn't work like that. Having an equipped trinket around that gives like a baseline intellect and a stat proc, which, by the way, are the kind of trinket effects I love. I don't like these random fishes flying out and slapping me in the face 10 times and hitting the boss. Just give me a stat proc with a baseline amount of intellect. Or just swap it. Give me a baseline secondary stats with an intellect proc. That's great. Those are the trinkets everybody wants to play with. Nobody wants these random Leviathan's lure trinkets. It's an awesome trinket. It's great. It's cool, but I don't want to have to work for value out of my trinkets most of the time. If they're crazy OP, then sure, but like they're not. So Unbound Changing is a very good equip-based trinket. Very good in the raid, very good in Mythic Plus, because you can pair it with an on-use trinket, and just good in general. So the secondary stats, the main stat is very, very, very solid. Glyph of Assimilation. So I've been getting a lot of questions as to why this trinket is performing so well and simming so high. I've dug a decent bit with this trinket. So, and it's mainly for Affliction here. Number 1, this is an on-use trinket. So it's baseline intellect, which you don't always see on other trinkets. So some of them, like the Gladiator's badges, they give haste, they give crit. This gives baseline intellect. The on-use deals arcane damage to an enemy over 10 seconds. So number 1, this scales with Dark Soul for Affliction. This scales with haste. It will deal more damage and tick more higher levels of haste. Number 2, Haunt, Shadow's Embrace increase the damage Glyph of Assimilation does for Affliction. So you've got essentially, okay, it's 9% for Shadow's Embrace. 10 for haunt. You have a 20% damage increase on this trinket, and you also make it tick a decent bit more. The average on use of this trinket at mythic eye level, let's see if I can set this high enough here. I've seen it'd be it's 226, right? I don't even know. Yeah, 226. I swear I played this game. Let's go here. It deals 6,398 damage. I've seen the average use of this trinket in logs being about 18,000 damage because of damage increases and haste increases and things like that. So you can get a lot of value out of the on-use damage wise for this. Now, that is a single target damage increase. It does not spread to multiple targets, but if your target dies while afflicted with assimilation, basically the unused damage effect, you get a bit of mastery. So you can use this for a bit of like a mastery gain. It's not bad in plus, not bad in rating, depending if ads are dying. You can time it right. The problem is, well, I mean, honestly, in Mythic Plus, if an ad's dying, the rest of the pack's probably dying sort of soon too. It depends a bit, but you can get some value out of the Trinket's mastery effect, and the actual on-use damage effect is not that bad either. So I've given Glyph a pretty decent rating in rating, and a decent one in Mythic Plus too. I don't have one myself. I haven't been able to play with it as much as I'd like to, but I did a bit of research on it. That's why. Number 4, Dark Moon deck. We're going to speed it up a bit here. Dark Moon deck, a solid starting trinket. It's fine. A lot of baseline intellect on it. 200 eye level off the bat. The effect here can AoE. So the good thing with the trinket for affliction, you can pop it, you can pop it, and then you can rapture on however many enemies that it hits, and they have an increased chance to take critical hit damage. So it actually gains more value for AF than it does Destro or Demo, because AF can dump all its resources in this window here, being, 10 seconds. Destro and Demo can't really, plus Demo deals damage from your pets, not you, so there's that. Not a bad trinket. It's okay in rating. I think it's a little better in Mythic Plus. Not anything crazy, but not terrible. A decent starting trinket for sure. The 2 gladiator trinkets here, Gladiator's Insignia and Gladiator's Badge. Insignia of Alacrity and Badge of Ferocity. This is actually the other really good equipped trinket in game right now, and this arguably might be better than Unbound Changeling at the same eye level. Now, I also have gotten lucky. I have a 226 Unbound Changeling. I know I've gotten lucky. It's streamer luck. It's whatever. It is what it is. But this trinket here is very good. Unlike Changeling, this Changeling gives you a baseline amount of secondary stats, haste, mastery, and crit. This one gives you main stat being intellect, and it comes with a baseline amount of haste here. Now, the thing with the Sinful Gladiator trinkets are that you have to PvP to get them. You can buy the baseline 200 eye level 1 for very low conquest, but you have to be 1600 for 213 upgrades on these trinkets, 1800 for 220, and I believe it's 2100 rating in 2s, 3s, or rated battlegrounds, whatever, to upgrade them to 226. Now, if you can do that, these trinkets are very, very, very good. A 226 Gladiator's Insignia, I would probably play over Unbound Changeling. This has, from what I've seen in logs, anywhere from like a 40 to 60% uptime on bosses. I've seen as high as 85% with this trinket on bosses. That's actually incredible. This is like 1.5 times a flask, I believe. It might even be a lot more. That's really, really strong for this trinket. The badge, this is an equipped trinket, by the way. The badge, this is very interesting because it's not just good for AF, it's good for Demo, and it's good for Destro. Because once again, if you remember back to this a few minutes ago, Destro's still playing Nia. One version of Demo, and this is the one you're gonna play for Demo, like you're going single target here, is also playing Nia. What else is a 1-minute cooldown? Oh yeah, Soul Rot. So you compare this with your Soul Rot, with your Tyrant, with your Infernal, with your Rapture windows for Affliction. A 1-minute cooldown that gives a lot of primary stat is really, really solid. So this is up there as being one of, if not my best, I guess, rated on-use trinket. It's got an A every spot. I like secondary stat trinkets in Mythic Plus, an A in Mythic Plus, an A in rating for both of them. If you can get these both at a high eye level, I'd say baseline 213. If you're at 206, I think they're better options. You can probably farm up from dungeons or raids, but 213 and higher are where these really start to gain value, and they're like comparatively to what else you can get. They are very, very strong. Let's put it this way. I play my 213 badge over a 226 cube pretty much in every fight. So there's that. Imperial Ordnance. This trinket's very, very odd. So baseline mastery fires 5 missiles at up to 5 targets. This trinket, basically it's an on-use trinket. It takes 12 seconds for the missiles to go out to the target and come back to you. When they come back to you, then you get the actual intellect buff. Now, this is a 3-minute cooldown trinket. This is a long time, but the actual ordinances deal damage and then give you an int buff. This is also a very peculiar trinket because you can pair this with another on-use trinket and not lose very much value. Now, let's say you're going double on-use like ordinance and you're playing badge. You will incur, if you pop this first, you will incur the penalty here of it'll put this trinket on cooldown for 20 seconds. But the thing is, the intellect orbs don't come back to you for 12 seconds. So when they do, you get the buff for 15 seconds. And this thing will have about 7 seconds left on CD. So you can get about a 7 to 8 second overlap on the Imperial Ordnance buff and this buff. This is one of the reasons as to why this combo is so incredibly insane on Sludgefist. Look at this. Like you can do this first pillar and fourth pillar. Big ordnance, first pillar and fourth pillar with PIs and lust. This trinket destroys Sludgefist. It is so incredibly good with it being combo with badge, and you can badge every single pillar. Now there are other fights just here that could be pretty solid with that kind of effect, looking at like Stone Legion generals and really just certain polls that you want to have this combo. But the Imperial Ordnance badge, Imperial Ordnance Ruby combo, even like the Imperial Ordnance Bell combo, which we'll get to in a little bit here, are very, very, very strong and should not be underestimated in the right setting. Ordnance is pretty solid. I don't hate it outside of those settings. I think it's fine. A 3-minute cooldown is a pretty long time, but your Dark is a 3-minute cooldown. Your Infernal is probably 3-ish. And I mean, your Tyrant, well, it'll line up at a certain point. I gave it a decent rating in plus and rating. It's okay. But in certain settings, it's exceptionally powerful. And it's certainly one that I'd want to have in my bags, even if I didn't use it for every single fight. Soul Letting Ruby. This is one that gained a lot of value in the Race to World First from THD and Zyro and everybody playing it. This is a good trinket. It's from Theater of Pain. The thing with this trinket is that it does not necessarily sim properly, because if you read here, the soul heals you for X and grants you up to a certain amount of crit. You gain more crit from lower health targets. So in a sim, when it pops this trinket on pull, you're not going to get really any extra added value with the crit. When it pops it 2 minutes later, you're going to get about 60% health wise in the boss worth of extra crit. And when it pops it at 4 minutes, you're getting it basically at what, 20% in the boss. But you could maybe pop this on lower health mobs, you know, over the course of a fight, looking at, you know, a fight like Stone Legion Generals, where this trinket gained a lot of value in the first place. It has a lot of extra hidden value, but you won't see that in sims. And to a similar extent, you might have a fight where ads reset on health, or targets have a weird health pool and then move up and down, where you lose value on Ruby, where I guess you lose some in certain settings. Ruby it doesn't sim as good as it can be. It's important to keep that in mind. It can be better than it seems, but you really have to know what you're doing on a fight by fight basis for Ruby and then really just go from there. Better than it seems though. Give it a solid rating from 3+ and a B for rating. Where it's good, it's very good, just like Imperial Ordnance. Instructor's Divine Belt. This trinket is solid. It's one of those weird ones. I think it was like Pearl Diver's Compass and BFA that you had from like a World Quest, and everyone was trying to get them when they popped up. This is the Pearl Diver's Compass of Shadowlands. It gives you an insane amount of mastery. It's 425 mastery at 148 with baseline intellect. What is it? What is this trinket? The thing is, it's for 9 seconds. Most trinkets last like 15, like 16 for Ruby here. You have 15 for this. You have 15 for the badge. 9 seconds. But a 1.5-minute cooldown and a lot of mastery. So this trinket you can get at a 197 eye level, I believe is the highest you can get. You can get it either from the mission table or a world quest if it pops up. This is a very, very solid option. I have one at I think 180 or so, and I don't play it, but it's still a decent option when you're comparing it to like a 226 cube, or when you're comparing it to like a badge. If you don't have a great badge, for example, I would definitely look at picking this up. Playing this with like an ordnance that we saw, where's that here? Like on Sludgefist, incredibly strong. Even looking through other sims here or other parses, you'll see it here and there. Once again, here on Dark Vein, you'll see it in a few other places. It's not that the trinket's bad. It's just that you can only get it to a certain eye level, which is 197 through a calling quest, I believe. But even at 184, even at 171, it's still seeing play here. Look at cube, a 210 cube, and a 171 bell. It's still seeing play. It's hard to acquire, but I definitely would have to lead it if I got one. This is a very strong option in plus and rating. I gave it an A pretty much across the board here. Kabbalist, hymnal thing, this trinket's awkward. I don't really want to make of it. It's fine. The thing is, this drops from Sire Denathrius, very similar to the one from Raden. I forget what it's called, the Vita Charge Titan Shard. This requires people in your party, not your raid, your party. So if you're in a raid setting, you have to have everybody that has this trinket in, you know, party 1, 2, 3, or 4 to stack the effect. It's fine, it's solid. Baseline intellect, crit bonus, it's okay. I think there are probably better options out there. If your entire raid it's a mythic version of the trinket and you're stacked, great. But this drops from Sire, so he is the hardest final boss. Well, he's the final boss of the tier. It's not the hardest, but he's the final boss of the tier. And with loot being so scarce, it's taken people a bit longer than probably anticipated to get a full stat group for this. I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's terrible. I gave it a solid rating in Mythic Plus and rating in general. It might be like a B- in Plus just because you can't stack it as much. It's okay. Not amazing, not terrible, but it will not sim with max value. You have to have a custom APL for it. I'm going to try and find it and put it next to this on the actual spreadsheet, but this will also not sim for max value if you have a party of 3 or 4 people in your group. Satchel Misbegotten Minions, Infinitely Divisible Ooze, Trinkets from, I believe, Plaguefall and Necrotic Wake maybe. These are both fine. They're okay. They're baseline intellect with like a damage based effect. They're fine. I'm not a huge fan of them in plus or rating. They're just there. They are, once again, equipped trinkets though, which pair well with 1 on use. 1 equip, 1 on use. Solid alternatives, but not anything to write home about. Dreadfire Vessel. This is the other trinket option from Sire Denathrius. This is actually better than it seems in single target. This is one of our better ones. It's baseline intellect on use, but it unleashes basically a fire blast. You can see it right here. The thing with this trinket, it's on use, but it doesn't really matter if you're playing with another unused trinket. Let's say you're playing this with like the badge. So you go and you pop your soul right, you want a rapture, just pop your badge. It's fine. And then you'll incur the CD on this, but who cares? It's just fire damage. It's not a stat bonus that you want to stack. It's not like you're playing badge and then this thing gives you, 200 intellect. And you're like, dang it, I really want to stack these. Who cares? Just all you want to pop this with your CDs and pop this afterwards. Just let the fireball go. Who cares? As long as you don't miss a use of this over the course of a fight because you're incurring that 20-second cooldown, this is fine. You don't lose any value. I think Dreadfire is better than it seems single target. The thing is, this tier, it doesn't gain any value in 2 target and 3 target with ad spawning. And there are a lot of fights this tier like that, like Stone Legion and even Dance Boss and things, where Dreadfire, well, is not the best option, but it's not terrible. In Patchwork, I think people are sleeping on Dreadfire Vessel a good bit. Definitely one to keep your eyes on. I gave it a C in Mythic Plus because this is not really good when it comes to, once again, having multiple targets present. I gave it a B+ in rating. I might put a little caveat here for single target versus AoE, but it's definitely not a bad option. The final thing we have here is Soul Igniter. I'm not a huge fan of Soul Igniter. It's an unused trinket. I heard it's buggy. I don't play with one. I haven't had one. If you want to play with it in Plus, you can. Just keep in mind, the cone on Soul Igniter is massive. You're probably going to pull a boss 8 dungeons down when you pop this trinket. So make sure you don't hit another pack. It's okay single target damage wise. Once again, baseline intellect and unused trinket, but it's just sort of awkward. It's okay, but there are definitely better options outside there besides Soul Igniter. So recapping here, once again, Inscrutable, large sim trap because of giving healers mana and other things. Great trinket in Unbound Changeling. Glyph Assimilation stimming very well for Affliction due to haste scaling, damage-based effects, Haunt, Shadow's Embrace, which is why it's stimming higher than it seems. Darkwind deck is fine. Badge, Insignia and Badge are both great trinkets, so super solid. Imperial Ordnance can be paired with double unused trinkets. It won't sim well, but it will actually play very well. So keep that in mind. Definitely want to have one in your back pocket. So letting Ruby in sims will not show the actual value you can get out of this trinket in fights where ads are dying quite often. Keep that in mind. Divine Bell is very, very hard to get at a high eye level, but once again, it can be good at lower eye levels too, because it's a lot of mastery off the bat regardless. Hymnal, once again, you have to have a party member, or I guess a stacked party for max value here. Satchel, Infinitely Divisible Use, they're just fine. They're okay. They're just pretty much equip-based trinkets. Dreadfire Vessel, good single target. Doesn't really matter if you're playing double on use, which is great. Doesn't really incur the penalty. Doesn't really matter a whole lot. And Soul Igniter, okay single target. Not amazing when it comes to okay single target. Better AoE, but there are better options out there in the first place. So that is why trinket sims are at issue right now. You really have to know what fight you're going into. If you're going into Mythic Plus, if you're going into rating, what the trinket does, what it does when it's paired with another trinket like Imperial and Badge, or like Dark Moon Deck and Cube, where they gain value, where they lose value, and everything like that. So hopefully that helped you guys out. Once again, I will have a link to this spreadsheet in the video description, and I will be updating it over the course of, I would say, the remainder of the tier. Thanks for watching, dudes. I hope this video really hopefully gave you all a better understanding of how the trinkets look in Shadowlands and 9.0, and also a in-depth look at conduits in Neos Tools Burrs, and how Affliction, Destro, and Demo are probably going to be looking rounding out the tier as far as Night Fae go. Now, once again, these were indeed Night Fae sims. If you're playing a Kyrian or a Necrolord or a Venthyr Warlock, all you have to do is log into raid bots, run a top gear sim, scroll down, hit the other Soulbinds for your actual Covenant, and send them there. The actual conduits like Infernal Brand, Rolling Agony, Focus Malignancy, those combinations will all be the same across the board. It might just be certain abilities like Neos Tools Burrs, or a Many's Necrolord ability that's not a potency one but deals damage that might gain a bit of value. So I would encourage you to run your own sims if you are a non-Night Fae Warlock, but regardless, the normal potency conduits should be the same across the board. Let me know what you guys think of this video in the comment section below. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them there. Be sure to get back to you. And once again, any weak auras, profiles, or add-ons you see here, you can indeed grab for free off my Twitch. If you want to swing by, hang out, ask any questions anytime, feel free to do so. If you guys want to see more WoW content to help support the channel, be sure to hit the like button below, hit the subscribe button while you're down there. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.